Branford Marsalis is one of the top jazz saxophonists in the world. You cite a number of classical composers as your philosophical mentors, including Sergei Prokofiev, Robert Schumann, and one of my favorites as well, Darius Milhaud.
Darius came from the French tradition. It was open to allowing other sounds and styles of music in, more so than the German tradition. But the German tradition at that time was so vast, and there was such a huge emphasis on melody and melodic content. It's something that appeals to me because of that. I think that melody is the strongest aspect of any song, while harmony is important, and the two inform one another. Melody can exist without harmony, and modern jazz kind of proves that harmony can exist without melody, but it doesn't exist in a very successful fashion, in my opinion.
On your new duo CD with pianist Joey Calderazzo, you sort of import some classical performance traditions.
Chamber music really utilizes the space. Classical composers and classical performers dig into the pieces and pull out things that you wouldn't ordinarily see or hear just upon looking at the music. It's more expressive because as the instrumentation gets larger, it just becomes more and more difficult to make those very instantaneous transitions, because it's much easier to do that with 4 people with eye contact than it is with 35 or 40, where eye contact is impossible. Oftentimes in jazz duets, I feel that there isn't a great utilization of the space. They approach the music pretty much the same way they would as if a quartet were there. It sounds more like a music minus 2 record, even though no such thing exists. It's that kind of thing where the way that they play is the same as they play in a quartet setting, but the drums and the bass just aren't present. So we really try to listen to I listen to a lot of classical music anyway, but it wasn't really about listening to the music, but listening to the music to get a grasp of how they present the music, the presentation, and the concept of chamber playing. And we tried to incorporate that into what we were doing.
One of the many highlights on the new CD is your interpretation of an early Brahms song called the Trauernde, or The Mourner.
Yeah, I don't think Joey and I really got to that one as well as I would have liked. The great thing about those composers, that era of composition, is that the emotional context is actually written into the music. It's one of the things that they did, the great ones did really well, is that they understood how to use sound to create an emotional effect. And it's just a matter of being aware of it and sensitive to it. As my teacher, Harvey Patel, professor of saxophone at the University of Texas at Austin, says, his goal was to teach me to get out of the way of the saxophone and to allow it to do what it was intended to do. That's the philosophy I have about music, is that when you have a really beautiful piece of music and everything that you need is in the music, just get out of the way and allow it to be what it was designed to be. Just interpret it in the fashion it was crafted to be interpreted, and it takes care of itself.
Music by Johannes Brahms featuring pianist Joey Calderazzo and saxophonist Branford Marsalis. You keep the classical inspiration going with your composition, The Bard Lacrimosa.
I was listening to a Prokofiev opera called The Gambler, and in one of the arias in the opera, the soprano sings this. The first 8 notes of the melody come from this aria in that very first chord, and I heard the chord, and it was such a striking chord, so beautiful and so unusual. I pointed out on the piano because I just wanted to try to get the sound in my head. And as I started playing the chord and playing that melody, do-dee-dee-dee-do-dee-da, I added a second chord to it and then just kept writing it. It kept going. And it was just a matter of finding a melody that would tie all the ideas together. And as I wrote the melody, I realized that the melody was cobbled from other things that I had listened to over the years. It was just a matter of some were more obvious, some were less obvious. It was actually amazing that I'd kind of stolen this oboe transition in one of Wagner's ring operas, the Walküre, and it's deep embedded into the music. And I kind of knew it was from Wagner, but I couldn't find it. So on a long drive, I was listening to Walküre, and then suddenly it jumped out, and I just started to laugh. When I heard it, I said, oh, there it is. The song is kind of an amalgam of ideas that I got from all the music that I had been listening to.
Perhaps the most contemplative and yet somewhat optimistic song on the CD is Joey Calderazzo's tune called Hope.
It was a song that he wrote and dedicated to the saxophonist Michael Brecker, who was dying of some bizarre bone marrow blood cell thing. I'd never heard of the disease. I guess it's more common and prevalent than I thought. And he called the song Hope because this was the period when Michael would be very gravely ill, and then suddenly he would improve, and he'd be gravely ill, and he would improve. And in the last year of his life, suddenly there was an upswing. So Joey wrote the song and called it Hope because it seemed like everything was hopeful at the time. It's such a beautiful piece. I'd heard Joey play it in other situations, and I said, man, that's a great tune. I don't think you guys are playing it right, which is always funny to tell somebody that on a song that they wrote. He's like, you're crazy, man. I said, okay, well, we'll start playing it. And I convinced him to play it as a rubato ballad as opposed to playing it as a piece in time. The song is such a beautiful song. The rest of it just took care of itself.
Thanks to our guest this afternoon, saxophonist and composer Branford Marsalis. For The Front Row, this is Eric Ladow.